Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout my last recorded episode, which was episode 215 with Kyle from Luxury Leaf. He is a hemp clothing business, and he talks about kind of how he created his business, how he got into it, and just talking a little bit about his college experience, which led him to create the brand. If you want to check that episode out, you can go to thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it'll pop up for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. As well as plugging the 5 pillars to create a meaningful life. It's only available on Amazon. If you buy it, review it. If we buy it, read it, review it. It goes a long way in the algorithm, and that would be greatly appreciated. So that brings me to today's episode, episode 216. And obviously, if you can't tell, if you're a usual watcher of the podcast, I'm in a new place. And this episode is dedicated to testing out the studio that I kind of created here, testing out the equipment, testing out the sounds, while also talking about specifically this book that I have right here. It is The Extinction of Experience, Being a Human in a Disembodied World by Christine Rosen. I'm currently reading it, and some of the chapters and things kind of sparked an interest in kind of discussing that and talking about kind of the extinction of experience and like how we're substituting like the internet, technology, social media for those experiences. And we'll get into that. And today with me, I have a very, very special guest, my girlfriend, Elyse Beauregard. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And I greatly appreciate you coming on to kind of, we're also testing and seeing how the equipment works with 2 people and obviously the cameras and all that stuff. So you'll be able to go back and forth with me on some of this conversation regarding extinction of experience, what your thoughts are, and I'll kind of like pass it to you and all that stuff. But for people who might not know, the editor of my book is Elyse. And I got to give you your flowers for that. I really appreciate you for taking the time out of your life to actually edit the book. I know that was a frustrating experience for you, knowing how many grammatical errors that I had. So I do appreciate you for doing that, and to have it on the podcast and say that and give you your flowers in real time is always super important for me as like a podcast host. So appreciate for that. Do you want to share anything about yourself, like kind of where you're from? And obviously, I mentioned you kind of wrote the book. You don't have to mention your work or anything like that, but just kind of like a little background.
Sure. Born and raised in Rhode Island. Um, what else should I share?
You got a dog. We have a dog.
Yep. Little Miss. And
You're a huge podcast supporter,
yes.
the Carroll Connection,
Biggest
and many
fan.
other of crime and thriller podcasts. And
Yeah.
we share that interest and watch Kill Tony obviously together. That's a huge
Yes.
thing for us. But kind of tracking back towards the episode and kind of creating a runway for us to kind of discuss the extinction of experience. So, kind of the thought process that I had was specifically around a chapter that was discussing kind of with technology and writing and learning in a classroom. And one of the actual chapters was called Hand to Mouse. And it was kind of talking about how nowadays people are, or I should say students, whether it's college, elementary, or anything like that, are using technology, especially Chat GPT, like taking notes for you and AI and all this stuff. And how these devices or this technology is hurting learning and not actually helping. Because obviously, there's a benefit to having something take notes for you, sure. But when I reflect on my college experience, where I had to, well, started to get to use like the actual, how do I say this, computer to type notes and stuff like that, and or they'd give us a study guide that you could add notes to while their person's lecturing. Um, I never really looked at it. I didn't really care for it. When I look at actual like handwritten notes, I memorized it better. I remembered it better. And even like my current work, like I have notes that I used when I first got hired back in like 2019. So like to me, and I learned it better by taking handwritten notes. If I took it on a computer and typed it out, that actual learning curve might have been like a bigger curve. And basically what Christine Rosen's talking about in this book is that actual fact. It's like we know that technology isn't always helping us, but we're okay with it because it's a faster, quicker
Mhm.
response. I think the average number of words typed is no, the average number of words written in a minute is like 13, and the average typed is like 40. So it's like, yeah, way faster. But she was describing how when you can only write X number of words per minute, it forces you to listen more like intently and summarize it better,
Yeah.
which enforces that learning curve that we're not always seeing with technology. It's kind of like we're giving up on that human experience, kind of what this book is talking about. And I think that's super interesting. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that specific topic.
Yeah, I mean, just from my own experience in school, when I would take notes, I was never a great studier because I was a decent enough student to not really have to study too much, but I would still take notes in class. And just writing things down in and of itself was what was helping me remember what I was learning. And I didn't have to go back to my notes. And I think it was the action of actually writing words down that helps you remember something better than typing something. And I think because you can type faster, that speed, your brain might not be able to keep up with it the same as if you're writing something out. Your brain's processing and it has time to process when you're writing. So
And it's
I
that
would agree.
physical, like, actual act of writing.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how, like, there's certain things in the brain that, like, actually, like, can release and regulate when you're doing that because it's a physical act. Obviously, typing's physical too, but, like,
Mhm.
there's just something with, like, actual writing and forcing us to do that. And she even goes on to talk about how, like, the actual, like, writing experience is, like, disappearing. And she talked about, I don't know if I think it was in China or Japan, um, like, the number of kids that don't even know how to write is, like, going down, and, like, traditional
Mhm.
Chinese lettering, like, that's, like, already starting to be phased out, especially in a country like that where they're very technologically advanced and they're pushing that type of stuff. And they talked about kind of like America where, like, the actual, like, cursive is kind of going out and people don't know how to sign their names and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and how that's becoming an issue, whether you're signing legal documents, like checks, stuff like that. This younger generation, like Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and what's going to come after them is going to struggle with that because it's being phased out. And we have things like, I mean, I use it at work, a digital signature,
Yeah.
where at least we did like a handwritten signature, photocopied it, and then you have like a password and you can sign in and sign your documents like
Right.
electronically, which is interesting because we're kind of disconnecting the actual physical action of signing something for just clicking buttons.
Mhm.
And that kind of goes hand in hand with what she's kind of emphasizing in this book is like we're giving up on the human experience, and it might not necessarily be for the better. We might be actually regressing in some things, and obviously we're going to learn new skills, but those things that make us innately human might start disappearing, and that's actually kind of sad to like see that in real time. I mean, we talk all the time about like me doing the podcast and like having like, I guess I've increased or worked on like my personal connection skills or interview skills or like
Mhm.
actual communication skills with people, like having legitimate eye contact, talking to them, like not feeling anxious about it. Like, and she kind of talks a little bit about that, how we're phasing that out for like FaceTime and stuff like that, where we're looking at a screen. And then she even makes the point, which is a valid point. Half the time when we're talking to someone on FaceTime, we're not even really paying attention to
Yeah.
them. We're doing 30 different other things because we have that luxury to do that.
Mhm.
Versus when you're with someone in person, if you're not paying attention to them, like it's going to be kind of obvious. And that's going to cause like tension in whatever friendship, relationship, like family connection, work connection, that's gonna cause an issue. Like, if someone's not paying attention to you while you're talking to them, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And we're okay with that on FaceTime for some reason. I don't know what that reason actually is, but I think it's an interesting point that she raises that we're kind of phasing this out and, like, more people are being comfortable or becoming comfortable with self-isolation.
Mhm.
And the more that you isolate, the more it becomes normal to you. So when you have to actually socialize with people, the anxiety increases, you become a very anxious person, and then those normal face-to-face conversations become a lot more like taxing on you.
Yeah.
And obviously we have like the differences between like introverts and extroverts, but I think it's interesting that it's like a muscle. And like I've kind of like learned that through doing this, but reading it through like her book, I was like, wow, I'm actually like kind of really like recognizing that I've actually worked and developed on a skill by doing a podcast for almost 6 years
Mhm.
and interviewing well over 100, probably closer to like getting close to 200 because I've had repeat people. But having that weekly, bi-weekly, almost monthly podcast to like talk to someone and forcing myself to interview them, especially when I don't know them. So I think that's an interesting skill. I don't know if you wanted to like tackle that aspect of like social media and like FaceTime and that aspect of communication.
Well, I think one of the things you mentioned about FaceTiming and how we're okay with not giving our undivided attention, I think part of it is, which I know we'll talk about this a little bit, I think, is the value of in person. I think FaceTime, because you're not in person, you're not fully acknowledging that person in front of you because they're not actually in front of you. I think that's probably part of it, so you feel less connected. There's a feeling of being a little disconnected to someone if they're not face to face in front of you, so I think that might be part of it. Um, but then, as you mentioned, it's like a muscle when you are interacting with people. I will say when I have a long weekend between work, when I'm, not working in office for a few days, the thought of going back in office and realizing I'm going to have to interact with people is a little daunting. And I think part of it is because I haven't been using that muscle for a few days. And it's definitely, you know, you can tell a difference between when you've had to interact with people all week versus you've had days in between and you have to go back and you're like, all right, you got to mentally prepare. Now that's partially an introverted thing, but for me it's definitely it's a muscle for sure, I
Yeah,
think.
that's a good point, and I think especially since like that post-COVID experience where remote work was introduced, and obviously I'm a very big proponent of or big supporter, I guess I should say, of like remote work and working remotely, and if you're able to do a job somewhere else effectively, like they should be allowed to do that. Um, I think I've come around a little bit on the in-person experience in work. Like I understand it, still not in love with it. Because granted, it just corporate America is corporate America, and I think there's many things that we need to address in that situation. But there is value in seeing your coworkers and working side by side to them and having that relationship with
Yeah,
them
and I
because
think just because you don't enjoy it doesn't mean it's not healthy for you. Like, not everything that's good for you or healthy for you is something you enjoy, but you still have to do it because it's good for you. That's, I think, the same as interacting with others on a regular basis.
yeah, and that's I think that's a great point. Is like a lot of us won't do the thing that is good for us because it's scary or we don't want to do it. It makes us anxious. We don't like it.
Or not convenient.
Not convenient, but it's good for us as human beings. Like being social creatures is, for better or worse, is like part of the experience. And like there's actual like science out there. And like, I know Christine Rosen in the book kind of references this is like it helps regulate emotions. It helps like fire the brain in certain ways that are like good with dopamine and stuff, like making actual eye contact with someone, like there it releases like certain feelings and emotions in you that FaceTime or through the internet is very like disconnected.
Mhm.
And obviously, I've always been a huge thing about the Carroll connection, like making those connections with people, having those relationships, creating networks that are positive for you. I mean, everyone knows the corny things. You're like the five closest people around you is in going to dictate kind of who you are. Like those things are real, and I don't think a lot of people practice that because it is like a thing that you must practice is like working on the connections and like nurturing them, and it's hard. Like real life is hard. Like you have all the things with work, bills, like relationships that you have to tend to. Like there's a lot of moving parts, and then yourself too. Like with the self-love culture that we've introduced in our society, which is moderately healthy. I think there's some things that have been like an overcorrection, but you have to work on that stuff too. And I don't think we always take that into account. Like there is a self-love connection to be formed that sometimes we're not taught, that we don't understand, and we have to continue to figure that out as we're like working through things. So that's like another thing that we have to kind of focus on, but it's that connection aspect that is really missing in society that it's kind of sad. Like, and I think I've noticed it more since I've done a podcast is like seeing how people like react to being behind the cameras and lights. And obviously this is your first podcast experience and doing it with me. Um, Not everyone is super comfortable, and like obviously you were a little nervous behind getting behind the camera and doing this with me, but I think overall it's a cool experience to be able to do. It's like, yeah, sure, there's cameras, but like we're having the conversation talking about kind of the stuff that I'm reading in this book and stuff that's kind of relevant to our lives. And I think the more that you can do that in your day-to-day life, it doesn't have to be on a podcast, it doesn't have to be this forced. um it's healthy for you. And I think we run away from sometimes this that stuff because like you said, it's scary or we don't want to do it,
Yeah.
but it is good for us. And I think we kind of sometimes don't partake in that type of
Mhm.
stuff. There was another point into the book that I'm like, I just had it and I lost it. It's gonna bother me. I know there was the one about the GPS and like that experience, but there was another one that I don't know if I'm gonna be able to remember. I'll just dive into uh, the GPS aspect one because I thought that was a really great analogy that she kind of gave. Is with the introduction of technology that we are kind of supplementing the experience of trial and error.
Mhm.
Like GPS is a great example, and it's something that we don't think about because it's one of those things that does improve life for us.
Right.
Like it's easier to get to places because we have a GPS. Oh, there's an accident here. I have to go this way. Or, ooh, this route's quicker. I would have never checked that if I didn't know it on a GPS. But what that does is it's making the decision for you instead of you being the explorer. The GPS is doing that, and you're just like kind of like a witness to the GPS.
Yeah.
And you're just doing what it tells you versus you like actually navigating through the world and being an explorer. And let's say you one day you went the wrong way, you took the wrong exit,
Mhm.
and you didn't have a GPS. You're just going off like, all right, I need to take exit 27, but you mess up and you take 26. So you have to go a different way and you have to figure it out yourself. You might see like, oh, there's a coffee shop over here. What is this? Like, and you go in there and you actually it becomes one of your favorite coffee shops. We are potentially wiping that experience out because of something like a GPS. And it's not to say GPSs aren't like good because it definitely adds a lot of value to society, but that experience of discovering something new or having that new experience is lost because you wanted to just follow technology instead of actually doing it yourself. I thought that was just like an interesting point. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one. You don't have to if you don't want to.
Just that I would not survive without a GPS. I'm one of those people that has no directional abilities of my own. So I'm glad GPSs exist, but I agree. Obviously, that's something that if we were not so reliant on GPS, there would be probably a lot more experiences that we otherwise wouldn't have.
I think
So
it also creates community too. Like that's another aspect. Like
yeah.
if you have to rely on asking someone for directions or having that conversation, like, oh, I mean, it still happens nowadays every once in a while, but to actually stop, like, hey, I don't know where I'm supposed to go or what exit I'm supposed to take. Where should I go? And then like, oh yeah, I'm like, by the way, is there like any place to get food around here? They're like, oh yeah, check out this place. It's so good or whatever. Like that experience still exists, but like we're definitely supplementing that because it even like she even mentions too, like restaurants. Like we use things like Yelp and like or TripAdvisor when you want to go on trips and
Yeah.
stuff. Like we're getting even Amazon's a great example. Like we're getting our experience told to us by reviews. And obviously
Right.
there's a great experience that's a great thing sometimes because you avoid the negative, but the negative sometimes always helps create and change us as people too. So if we're constantly trying to limit our negative experiences, is that actually healthy for us? Is that actually beneficial for us when we're just always looking for the good, the positive, that dopamine rush? Is that healthy? Probably not. And I think that's like an interesting point that she kind of hits on that kind of like really stuck with me as I was reading this book. Um, I don't want to go too rambly on this because I'm only like 4 chapters in on this book. So like there's still definitely a lot that I have to read, but I did actually, now that I open this, anyone that follows me on Instagram, like I posted from my Portugal trip, the beginning quote of this book that really kind of was just like, whoa to me was, "We had the experience, but missed the meaning." T.S. Eliot, 4 quarters. And I think that's like an interesting point because we as people, especially with social media, like are so fixated on creating like this image of ourselves online that will be on our phone taking the right picture, editing in a certain way to try to get the right like visual on it instead of always just being in the moment. I think everyone always like makes fun of like concerts and stuff like that. I think it's like the perfect example of
Yeah.
like everyone's on their phone recording the moment, but like how many times do you actually go back and watch your concert
Right.
videos?
Yeah.
Very rarely. So it's like being more in the moment, and everyone preaches this, but like I think that like kind of really just drives it home is like don't miss like the meaning behind the experience. Like what are you experiencing? What's the value of the experience? Like when I did my Portugal trip review with Jake Wickham, my cousin, we talked about that. We talked about how the underlying meaning of that was like reconnecting with kind of like our quote unquote homelands and seeing our moms really enjoy where finding out where they kind of come from and seeing that connection form for them. And that experience is cool because it means something. There's value in that. And I think something like that's like a perfect example of like not missing the meaning. Obviously, there's moments in that trip where we're gonna miss the meaning. We're just like having fun doing whatever. But I think analyzing stuff and reviewing it and actually like talking about it is like a really good thing. But I do want to start bringing us home on this podcast. Um, I think this was a great test to see with the cameras. We had a little bit of content to kind of bring you guys, just talking a little bit about the book that I'm reading and kind of giving you guys some life updates of like kind of where I am right now. And hopefully, I'll bring you guys some more episodes coming starting in August. That's kind of like the timetable that I'm leaning on. I have guests lined up. I'm also booking for the fall and winter. So if anyone's interested in being a guest, hit me up, please. Um, Definitely want to finish this year strong. Obviously, I've been a little um, less consistent with the episodes. Some of it my fault, some of it not my fault. But I'm trying to be more consistent. Finishing the year strong. It's a little bit easier to get guests as like the summer starts to end and people are traveling less. So hopefully, can bring you guys some really great content. And again, I appreciate you, Elyse, for coming on the podcast and being willing to sit behind all the cameras and listen to me yap more. I know you listen to me yap a lot, so appreciate you being willing to just sit behind the cameras and kind of let me test some stuff out and also contribute to kind of like our conversation, even though you're not reading the book. I'm kind of just like telling you a little bit about, but again, thank you. And also thank you for editing the book as well.
Of course.
So for you guys, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your grandma. Check it out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection, and that'll be great. And then if you guys want to buy the 5 Pillars to Creating a Meaningful Life, it's only available on Amazon. If you get it, you read it, you really enjoy it, submit the review, and it goes a long way in the algorithm. So until next time, guys, peace.